Welcome back, friends, to part 6 of Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine. And I'm really excited about this reading of it. I hope you're enjoying it. Please leave a comment if you are. If there's something I can do better, I would sure appreciate knowing, because I can't fix it if I don't know, but I appreciate you being here with me. Let's get into it. Seems like the town is full of machines, said Douglas, running. Mr. Hoffman and his happiness machine, Miss Fern and Miss Roberta and their green machine, and now, Charlie, what you handed me? A time machine, panted Charlie Woodman, pacing him. Mother's scouts, engines on her. Travels in the past and future? John Huff asked, easily circling them. Only in the past, but you can't have everything. Here we are. Charlie Woodman pulled up at the hedge. Douglas peered in at the old house. Heck, that's Colonel Freeley's place. Can't be no time machine in there. He's no inventor, and if he was, we'd known about an important thing like a time machine years ago. Charlie and John tiptoed up the front porch steps. Douglas snorted and shook his head, staying at the bottom of the steps. Okay, Douglas, said Charlie, be a knucklehead. Sure, Colonel Freeley didn't invent this time machine, but he's got a proprietary interest in it, and it's been here all the time. We were too darn dumb to notice. So long, Douglas Spaulding, to you. Charlie took John's elbow as though he was escorting a lady, opened the front porch door screen and went in, but the screen door did not slam. Douglas had caught the screen and was following silently. Charlie walked along the enclosed porch, knocked, and opened the inside door. They all peered down a long, dark hall toward a room that was lit like an undersea grotto, soft, green, dim, and watery. Colonel Freeley? Silence. He didn't hear so good, whispered Charlie, but he told me to just come on in and yell, Colonel? The only answer was the dust sifting down and around the spiral stairwell from above. Then there was a faint stir in the undersea chamber at the far end of the hall. They moved carefully along and peered into a room which contained but 2 pieces of furniture, an old man and a chair. They resembled each other, both so thin you could see just how they had just been put together. Ball and socket, sinew and joint. The rest of the room was raw floorboards, naked walls and ceiling, and vast quantities of silent air. He looks dead, whispered Douglas. No, he's just thinking up new places to travel to, said Charlie, very proud and quiet. Colonel? One of the pieces of brown furniture moved, and it was the Colonel, blinking around, focusing and smiling a wild and toothless smile. Charlie! Colonel, Doug and John here came to... Welcome, boys! Sit down, sit down! The boys sat uneasily on the floor. But where's the... said Douglas. Charlie jabbed his ribs quickly. Where's the what? Asked Colonel Freeley. Where's the point in us talking, he means. Charlie grimaced at Douglas, then smiled at the old man. We got nothing to say, Colonel. You say something. Beware, Charlie. Old men only lie in wait for people to ask them to talk. Then they rattle on like a rusty elevator wheezing up a shaft. Ching Ling Soo, suggested Charlie casually. Eh? Said the Colonel. Boston, Charlie prompted. 1910. Boston, 1910. The Colonel frowned. Why, Ching Ling Soo, of course. Yes, sir, Colonel. Let me see now, the Colonel's voice murmured. It drifted away on serene lake waters. Let me see. The boys waited. Colonel Freeley closed his eyes. October 1st, 1910. A calm, cool, fine autumn night. The Boston Variety Theater. Yes, there it is. Full house, all waiting. Orchestra, fanfare, curtains. Ching Ling Su, the great Oriental magician. There he is, on stage, and there I am, front row center. The bullet trick, he cries. Volunteers. The man next to me goes up. Examine the rifle, says Ching. Mark the bullet, says he. Now fire this marked bullet from this rifle, using my face for a target. And, says Ching, at the far end of the stage, I will catch the bullet in my teeth. Colonel Freeley took a deep breath and paused. Douglas was staring at him, half puzzled, half in awe. John Huff and Charlie were completely lost. Now the old man went on, his head and body frozen, only his lips moving. Ready? Aim. Fire! Cries Ching Ling Su. Bang! The rifle cracks. Bang! Ching Ling Su shrieks. He staggers, he falls, his face all red. Pandemonium, audience on his feet. Something wrong with the rifle. Dead, someone says, and they're right, dead. Horrible, horrible. I'll always remember his face a mask of red, the curtains coming down fast and the women weeping. 1910, Boston Variety Theater. Poor man, poor man. Colonel Freeley slowly opened his eyes. Boy, Colonel, said Charlie, that was fine. Now how about Pawnee Bill? Pawnee Bill? And the time he was on the prairie way back in 75? Pawnee Bill. The colonel moved into darkness. 1875. Yes, me and Pawnee Bill on a little rise in the middle of the prairie waiting. Shh, says Pawnee Bill. Listen. The prairie like a big stage all set for the storm to come. Thunder, soft thunder again. Not so soft. And across that prairie, as far as the eye could see, this big, ominous, yellow, dark cloud, full of black lightning, somehow sunk to earth, 50 miles wide, 50 miles long, a mile high, and no more than an inch off the ground. Lord, I cried, Lord, from up on the hill, Lord! The earth pounded like a mad heart, boys, a heart gone to panic. My bones shook fit to break. The earth shook. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Boom! Rumble. That's a rare word, rumble. Oh, how that mighty storm rumbled along, down, up, and over the rises, and all you could see was the cloud and nothing inside. That's them, cried Pawnee Bill. And the cloud was dust, not vapors or rain, no, but prairie dust, flung up from the tinder dry grass like fine cornmeal, like pollen, all blazed with sunlight now, for the sun had come out. I shouted again, why? Because in all that hellfire filtering dust, now a veil moved aside and I saw them. I swear it, the grand army of the ancient prairie, the bison, the buffalo. The colonel let the silence build, then broke it again. Heads like giant Negroes, fists, bodies like locomotives, 20, 50, 200,000 iron missiles shot out of the west, gone off the track and flailing cinders, their eyes like blazing coals, rumbling toward oblivion. I saw that the dust rose up for a little while, showed me that the sea of humps, of dolloping manes, black, shaggy waves rising, falling. Shoot, says Pawnee Bill, shoot! And I cock and aim. Shoot, he says. And I stand there feeling like God's right hand, looking at the great vision of strength and violence going by, midnight at noon, like a glinty funeral train, all black and long and sad and forever. And you don't fire at a funeral train now, do you, boys? Do you? All I wanted then was for the dust to sink again and cover the black shapes of doom which pummeled and jostled on in great burdensome commotions. And boys, the dust came down. The cloud hid the million feet that were drumming up, and the thunder and dusting out of the storms. I heard Pawnee Bill curse and hit my arm. But I was glad I hadn't touched that cloud, or the power within that cloud was so much as a pellet of lead. I just wanted to stand watching time bundle by in great trundlings, all hid by the storm the bison made and carried with them toward eternity. An hour, 3 hours, 6 it took for the storm to pass on away over the horizon toward less kind men than me. Pawnee Bill was gone. I stood alone, stone deaf. I walked all numb through a town of 100 miles south, and heard not the voices of men, and was satisfied not to hear. For a little while I wanted to remember the thunder. I hear it still on summer afternoons like this, when the rain shapes over the lake a fearsome, wondrous sound, one I wish you might have heard. The dim light filtered through Colonel Freeley's nose, which was large and like white porcelain, which cupped a very thin and tepid orange tea indeed. "Is he asleep?" asked Douglas at last. "No," said Charlie, "just recharging his batteries." Colonel Freeley breathed swiftly, softly, as if he'd run a long way, and at last he opened his eyes. "Yes, sir," said Charlie in admiration. "Hello, Charlie." The colonel smiled at the boys puzzledly. "That's Doug, and that's John," said Charlie. "Howdy do, boys." The boys said hello, but, said Douglas, "where's the—" "My gosh, you're dumb," Charlie jabbed Douglas in the arm. He turned to the colonel. "You were saying, sir—" "Was I?" murmured the old man. "The Civil War," suggested John Huff quietly. "Does he remember that?" "Do I remember?" said the colonel. "Oh, I do. His voice trembled as he shut up his eyes again. "Everything. Except which side I fought on." "Well, the color of your uniform," Charlie began. "Colors begin to run on you," whispered the colonel. "It's gotten hazy. I see soldiers with me, but a long time ago I stopped seeing color in their coats or caps. I was born in Illinois, raised in Virginia, married in New York, built a house in Tennessee, and now, very late, here I am. Good Lord, back in Greentown. So you see why the colors run and blend." "But you remember which side of hills you fought on?" Charlie did not raise his voice. "Did the sun rise on your left or right? Did you march towards Canada or Mexico?" "Seems some mornings the sun rose on my good right hand, some mornings over my left shoulder. We marched all directions. It's most 70 years since. You forget suns and mornings that long past. You remember winning, don't you? A battle won somewhere?" "No," said the old man deep under. "I don't remember anyone winning, anywhere, anytime. War's never a winning thing, Charlie. You just lose all the time. And the ones who lose just ask for terms. All I remember is a lot of losing and sadness and nothing good but the end of it. The end of it, Charles. That was a winning all to itself, having nothing to do with guns. But I don't suppose that's the kind of victory you boys mean for me to talk on." Auntie Tom," said John Huff. "Ask about Auntie Tom." "I was there." The boy's eyes grew bright. "Bull Run. Ask him. Bull Run. I was there." Softly. "What about Shiloh?" "There's never been a year in my life I haven't thought what a lovely name, and what a shame to see it only on battle records." "Shiloh, then. Fort Sumter?" "I saw the first puffs of powder smoke." A dreaming voice. "So many things come back. Oh, so many things. I remember songs. All's quiet along the Potomac tonight, where the soldiers lie peacefully dreaming. Their tents in the rays of the clear autumn moon or the light of the watchfire are gleaming. Remember, all quiet along the Potomac tonight. No sound save the rush of the river, while soft falls the dew on the face of the dead, the pickets off duty forever." After the surrender, Mr. Lincoln on the White House balcony asked the band to play "Look Away, Look Away, Look Away, Dixieland." And then there was the Boston lady who one night wrote a song, "Will last 1,000 years. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Late nights I feel my mouth moving, singing back in another time. Ye cavaliers of Dixie, who guard the southern shores, when the boys come home in triumph, brother, with the laurels they shall gain. So many songs sung on both sides, blowing north, blowing south on the night winds. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. Tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes us free. The old man's voice faded. The boys sat for a long while without moving. Then Charlie turned and looked at Douglas and said, "Well, is he or isn't he?" Douglas breathed twice and said, "He sure is." The colonel opened his eyes. "I sure am what?" he asked. "A time machine," said Douglas. "A time machine." The colonel looked at the boys for a full 5 seconds. Now it was his voice that was full of awe. "Is that what you boys call me?" "Yes, sir, Colonel. Yes, sir." The colonel sat slowly back in his chair and looked at the boys and looked at his hands and then looked at the blank wall beyond them steadily. Charlie arose. "Well, I guess we better go." "So long, and thanks, Colonel." "What?" "Oh, so long, boys." Douglas and John and Charlie went on tiptoe out the door. Colonel Freeley thought they had crossed his line of vision, did not see them go. In the street, the boys were startled when someone shouted from a first-floor window above, "Hey!" They looked up. "Yes, sir, Colonel?" The colonel leaned out, waving one arm. "I thought about what you boys said." "Yes, sir?" "And you're right. Why didn't I think of it before? A time machine, by God, a time machine." "Yes, sir." "So long, boys. Come aboard any time." At the end of the street, they turned again, and the colonel was still waving. They waved back, feeling warm and good, then went on. "Chug-a-chug," said John. "I can travel 12 years into the past. Wham-chug-ding." "Yeah," said Charlie, looking back at that quiet house, "but you can't go 100 years. "No," mused John, "I can't go 100 years. That's really traveling. That's really some machine." They walked for a full minute in silence, looking at their feet. They came to a fence. "Last one over this fence," said Douglas, "is a girl." All the way home, they called Douglas Dora. Long after midnight, Tom woke to find Douglas scribbling rapidly in the nickel tablet by flashlight. "Doug, what's up?" "Up? Everything's up. I'm counting my blessings. Tom, look here. The happiness machine didn't work out, did it? But who cares? I got the whole year lined up anyway. Need to run anywhere on the main streets? I got the Greentown trolley to look around and spy on the world from. Need to run anywhere off the main streets? I knock on Miss Fern and Miss Roberta's door and they charge up the batteries on their electric runabout, and we go sailing down the sidewalks. Need to run down alleys and over fences to see the part of Greentown you only see around back and behind and creep up on? I got my brand new sneakers. Sneakers, runabout, trolley. I'm set. But even better, Tom, even better. Listen. If I want to go where no one else can go because they're not smart enough to even think of it, if I want to charge back to 1890 and then transfer to 1875 and transfer again across town to 1860, I just hop on the old Colonel Freeley Express. I'm writing it down here this way. Maybe old people were never children like we claim with Mrs. Bentley, but bug or little, some of them were standing around at Appomattox the summer of 1865. They got Indian vision and can sight back further than you and me will ever sight ahead. That sounds swell, Doug. What does it mean? Douglas went on writing. It means you and me ain't got half the chance to be far travelers they have. If we're lucky, we'll hit 40, 45, 50. That's just a jog around the block to them. It's when you hit 90, 95, 100 that you're far traveling like heck. The flashlight went out. They lay there in the moonlight. "Tom," whispered Douglas, "I got to travel all those ways, see what I can see. But most of all, I got to visit Colonel Freeley once, twice, 3 times a week. He's better than all the other machines. He talks, you listen, And the more he talks, the more he gets you to peering around and noticing things. He tells you you're riding on a very special train, by gosh. And sure enough, it's true. He's been down the track and knows. And now here we come, you and me along the same track, but further on, and so much looking and snuffing and handling things to do. You need old Colonel Freeley to shove and say, "Look alive," so you remember every second, every darn thing there is to remember. So when kids come around, when you're real old, you can do for them what the Colonel once did for you. That's the way it is, Tom. I got to spend a lot of time visiting him and listening so I can go far traveling with him as often as he can. Tom was silent a moment, then he looked over at Douglas there in the dark. Far traveling? You make that up? Maybe yes and maybe no. Far traveling, whispered Tom. Only one thing I'm sure of, said Douglas, closing his eyes. It sure sounds lonely. Bang! A door slammed. In an attic, dust jumped off bureaus and bookcases. Two old women collapsed against the attic door, each scrabbling to lock it tight. 1,000 pigeons seemed to have leaped off the roof right over their heads. They bent as if burdened, ducked under the drum of beating wings. Then they stopped, their mouths surprised. What they heard was only the pure sound of panic, their hearts in their chests. Above the uproar, they tried to make themselves heard. What have we done? Poor Mr. Quartermain! We must have killed him, and someone must have seen and followed us. Look! Miss Fern and Miss Roberta peered from the cobwebbed attic window. Below, as if no great tragedy had occurred, the oaks and elms continued to grow in fresh sunlight. A boy strolled by on the sidewalk, turned, strolled by again, looking up. In the attic, the old women peered at each other, as if trying to see their faces in a running stream. The police! But no one hammered the downstairs door and cried, "In the name of the law!" Who's that boy down there? Douglas Spaulding. Lord, he's come to ask for a ride in our green machine. He doesn't know. Our pride has ruined us. Pride and that electrical contraption. That terrible salesman from Gumport Falls. It's his fault and his talking. Talking like soft rain on a summer roof. Suddenly it was another day, another noon. They sat with white fans and dishes of cool, trembling lime jello on their arbored porch. Out of the blinding glare, out of the yellow sun, glittering, splendid as a prince's coach, the green machine. It glided. It whispered an ocean breeze, delicate as maple leaves, fresher than creek water. It purred with the majesty of cats prowling the noontide. In the machine, his Panama hat afloat in Vaseline above his ears, the salesman from Gumport Falls. The machine, with a rubber tread, soft, shrewd, whipped up their scalded white sidewalk, whirred to the lowest porch step, twirled and stopped. The salesman leaped out, blocked off the sun with his Panama hat. In the small shadow, his smile flashed. The name is William Terra, and this, he pinched a bulb, a sealed bark, is the horn. He lifted black satin cushions, storage batteries. A smell of lightning blew on the hot air. Steering lever, footrest, overhead parasol. Here, in toto, is the green machine. In the dark attic, the lady shuddered, remembering, eyes shut. Why didn't we stab him with our darning needles? Shh, listen. Someone knocked on the front door downstairs, and after a time the knocking stopped. They saw a woman cross the yard and enter the house next door. Only Lavinia Nebbs came with an empty cup to borrow sugar, I guess. Hold me, I'm afraid. They shut their eyes. The memory play began again. An old straw hat on an iron trunk was suddenly flourished, it seemed, by the man from Gumport Falls. Thanks, I will have some iced tea. You could hear the cool liquid shock his stomach in the silence. Then he turned his gaze upon the old ladies, like a doctor with a small light, looking into their eyes and nostrils and mouth. Ladies, I know you're both vigorous. You look it. 80 years, he snapped his fingers, means nothing to you. But there are times, mind, when you're so busy, you need a friend indeed. A friend in need. And that is the two-seater green machine. He fixed his bright, stuffed fox green glass eyes gaze upon this wonderful machine. It stood smelling new in the hot sunlight, waiting for them, a parlor chair comfortably put to wheels. Quiet as a swan's feather, they felt him breathe softly in their faces. Listen. They listened. The storage batteries are fully charged and ready now. Listen. Not a tremor, not a sound. Electric, ladies. You recharge it every night in your garage. It couldn't, that is, the younger sister gulps in my seat. It couldn't electrocute us accidentally? Oh, perish the thought. He vaulted to the machine again, his teeth like those you saw in dental windows, alone, grimacing at you as you passed by late at night. Tea parties, he waltzed the runabout in a circle. Bridge clubs, soirees, galas, luncheons, birthday gatherings, DAR breakfasts. He purred away as if running off forever. He returned in a rubber-tired hush. Gold Star Mother's suppers. He sat primly, corseted by his supple characterization of a woman. Easy steering, silent, elegant arrivals and departures. No license needed. On hot days, take the breeze. Ah! He glided by the porch, head back, eyes closed, deliciously, hair tossing in the wind, thus cleanly sliced through it. He trudged reverently up the porch stairs, hat in hand, turning to gaze at the trial model as at the altar of a familiar church. Ladies, he said softly, $25 down, $10 a month for 2 years. Fern was first down the steps onto the double seat. She sat apprehensively. Her hand itched. She raised it, and she dared tweak the rubber bulb horn. A seal barked. Roberta on the porch screamed hilariously and leaned over the railing. The salesman joined their hilarity. He escorted the older sister down the steps, roaring at the same time, taking out his pen and searching in his straw hat for some piece of paper or other. And so we bought it, remembered Miss Roberta in the attic, horrified at their nerve. We should have been warned. Always did think it looked like a little car off the carnival roller coaster. Well, said Fern defensively, my hips bothered me for years, and you always get tired walking. It seemed so refined, so regal, like in the old days when women wore hoop skirts. They sailed. The green machine sailed so quietly. Like an excursion boat, wonderfully easy to steer, a baton handle you twitched with your hand, so... Oh, that glorious and enchanted first week. The magical afternoons of golden light humming through the shady town on a dreaming, timeless river, seated stiffly, smiling at passing acquaintances, sedately purring out their wrinkled claws at every turn, squeezing a hoarse cry from the black rubber horn at intersections, sometimes letting Douglas or Tom, Spaulding, or any of the other boys who trotted, chatting alongside, hitch a little ride. 15 slow and pleasurable miles an hour, top speed. They came and went through the summer sunlight and shadow, their faces freckled and stained by passing trees, going and coming like an ancient wheeled vision. And then, whispered Fern, this afternoon, it was an accident. But we ran away, and that's criminal. This noon, the smell of the leather cushions under their bodies, the gray perfume smell of their own sachets, trailing back as they moved in their silent grain machine through the small, languorous town. It happened quickly, rolling soft onto the sidewalk at noon because the streets were blistering and fire and the only shade was under the lawn trees. They had glided to a blind corner, bulbing their throaty horn. Suddenly, like a jack-in-the-box, Mr. Quartermain had tottered from nowhere. "Look out!" screamed Miss Fern. "Look out!" screamed Miss Roberta. "Look out!" cried Mr. Quartermain. The two women grabbed each other instead of the steering stick. There was a terrible thud. The green machine sailed on in the hot daylight under the shady chestnut trees, past the ripening apple trees, looking back only once. The two old ladies' eyes filled with faded horror. The old man lay on the sidewalk, silent. "And here we are," mourned Miss Fern in the darkening attic. "Oh, why didn't we stop? Why did we run away?" "Shh!" They both listened. The rapping downstairs came again. When it stopped, they saw a boy across the lawn in the dim light. Just Douglas Spaulding come for a ride again. They both sighed. The hours passed. The sun was going down. We've been up here all afternoon, said Roberta tiredly. We can't stay in the attic 3 weeks hiding till everybody forgets. We'd starve. What'll we do then? Do you think anyone saw and followed us? They looked at each other. No, nobody saw. The town was silent, all the tiny houses putting on lights. There was a smell of watered grass and cooking suppers from below. Time to put on the meat, said Miss Fern. Frank will be coming home in 10 minutes. Dare we go down? Dare we? Frank could call the police if he found the house empty. That'd make things worse. The sun went swiftly. Now there were only 2 moving things in the musty blackness. Do you, wondered Miss Fern, think he's dead? Mr. Quartermain? Yes. Roberta hesitated. We'll check this evening paper. They opened the attic door and looking carefully at the steps leading down. Oh, if Frank hears about this, he'll take our green machine away from us. And it's so lovely and nice riding and getting the cool wind and seeing the town. We won't tell him. We won't? They helped each other down the creaking stairs to the 2nd floor, stopping to listen. In the kitchen, they peered at the pantry, peeked out windows with frightened eyes, and finally set to work frying hamburger on the stove. After 5 minutes of working silence, Fern looked sadly over at Roberta and said, I've been thinking. We're old and feeble, and we don't like to admit it. We're dangerous. We owe a debt to society for running off. And a kind of silence fell on the frying in the kitchen as the 2 sisters faced each other, nothing in their hands. I think that, Fern stared at the wall for a long time, we shouldn't drive the green machine ever again. Roberta picked up a plate and held it in her thin hand. Not ever? She said. No. But, said Roberta, we don't have to get rid of it, do we? We can keep it, can't we? Fern considered this. Yes, I guess we can keep it. At least that'll be something. I'll go out now and disconnect the batteries. Roberta was leaving just as Frank, their younger brother, only 56, entered. Hi, sisters, he cried. Roberta brushed past him without a word and walked out into the summer dusk. Frank was carrying a newspaper, which Fern immediately snatched from him. Trembling, she looked at it through and through, and sighing, gave it back to him. Saw Douglas Spaulding outside just now. Said he had a message for you. Said for you not to worry. He saw everything and everything's all right. What did he mean by that? I'm sure I wouldn't know. Fern turned her back and searched for her handkerchief. Oh, well, these kids. Frank looked at his sister's back for a long moment, then shrugged. Supper almost ready? He asked pleasantly. Yes, Fern said from the kitchen table. There was a bubbling cry from outside. Once, twice, 3 times, far away. What's that? Frank peered through the kitchen window into the dusk. What's Roberta up to? Look at her out there sitting in the green machine poking the rubber horn. Once, twice more in the dusk, softly like some kind of mournful animal, the bulbing sound was pinched out. What's got into her? Demanded Frank. You just leave her alone, screamed Fern. Frank looked surprised. A moment later, Roberta entered quietly without looking at anyone, and they all sat down to supper. We're going to stop there, friends. And we'll start again. Have you ever done something like that? I thought, oh my gosh, please tell me nobody has seen. Actually, I've never, been in an accident and left. But can you imagine the fear that they had of what they had done? So it'll be fun to find out what happened. And hopefully we will in the next reading or so. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.